Hey, good evening. We've made it to Psalm number 10. Psalm number 10, which is a prayer. Well, the heading, I'll read it here in my Bible, says a prayer for the overthrow of the wicked. But as I read it here, I think I'd call it a prayer for justice. Because the psalmist has looked around and he says, in this world, a lot of things ain't right. And so, Lord, I'm praying for you to set them right, and for a prayer for justice. Because there's a lot of injustice back in the psalmist's day and in our day too. If you watched the morning service today, I quoted the psalm that we read earlier in the service from Psalm 73 that was sort of along these lines. The psalmist in Psalm 73 looked around and said, "Why do the wicked prosper?" He wasn't the only one to ask that question, because Job in his despair asked the same question to God. So why do the wicked prosper? And verse 17 of Psalm 73 has the answer, though. The psalmist asked that question, says, I look around and see all this injustice. Why do the wicked prosper? Then he got down to verse 17, he says, but then I went into the sanctuary of the Lord, and I understood his end. He realized then that, hey, he was just looking at this world, that sometimes justice ain't carried out in this world, but there will be ultimate justice in the end. He said, then I understood when he went to the sanctuary of the Lord, and he got a picture of eternity. So let's look at the psalmist in number 10 here. I'm not sure if this is one of David's psalms or not. Well, I think down here at the bottom it does indicate they believe it's David. You ever felt like this? If this is David, you ever felt like this yourself? Said to the Lord, why do you seem so far off, God? Why are you hiding yourself from me in times of trouble? I paraphrase that. Let me read it. Why standest thou afar off, O Lord? Why hidest thou thyself in times of trouble? Where are you at in all this trouble, Lord? Why do you seem like you're not near? And then he launches into his complaints that he sees in the world. And we can still look around them and see them in our day. He said, the wicked, remember the wicked's anybody that's not God's people. That's you if you don't know the Lord. But the good news is you can know the Lord through Christ. Trust in him. The wicked in his pride doth persecute the poor. Let the wicked, be taken in the devices that they have imagined. Or we kind of say something like that today. Let them be hung with their own rope. Let them be taken in the devices that they've imagined. For the wicked boasteth of his heart's desire, and he blesseth the covetousness, or he's all about greed, whom the Lord abhors. The Lord abhors that greediness, that covetousness. That's the 10th commandment. Thou shalt not have an ungodly desire. The wicked, verse 4, through the pride of his countenance will not seek after God. He's wicked because that's number one. He said he won't even look for God. He won't seek after God. If you'll seek him, you'll find him. And he said God's not in all his thoughts. And that's true. The people out there away from God, they don't ever think about God. But that don't mean that God don't think about them. His ways, this is the wicked's ways, are always grievous. Thy judgments are far out of his sight. He doesn't think God's word's far out of his sight. As for all his enemies, he puffs at them. He's full of pride and blows out himself at them. He said in his heart, I'll not be moved, for I shall never be in adversity. And trouble will never come my way. That's the people out there away from God. They don't realize that they live like that if they don't say it, that they're just like they'll never have any problems, right? They'll never have any trouble, that they don't have to worry about things. But boy, there's big trouble coming even if they slide through this world, ain't they? If they go out of this world without knowing God. His mouth, the wicked's mouth, this verse 7, is full of cursing. That's an indicator of the heart, the mouth, right? What's coming out of his mouth is indicating his heart. It's full of cursing and deceit and fraud. Under his tongue is mischief and vanity. His mouth and his tongue tells on his inner parts. He sits in the lurking places of the villages, looking to ambush somebody, I guess. In the secret places doth he murder the innocent. He's wicked. His eyes are privately set against the poor. He lies in wait secretly as a lion in his den. He said the wicked's just like a lion waiting to launch on whoever he can harm for his own gain. In the New Testament, Peter says it's the devil that walks around as a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. But you notice it says about the devil, he's walking around as a roaring lion. And what it says about the Lord, he is the Lion of the tribe of Judah. The wicked, though, he lies in wait secretly as a lion in his den. He lies in wait to catch the poor. He doth catch the poor when he draws them into his net. He's got them now. He crouches and humbles himself, that the poor may fall by his strong ones. He, the wicked, he said in his heart, God's forgotten, or God won't notice this. God won't know it. He hides his face. He'll never see it. God will never see this. He's the all-seeing God. Remember, he knows all and sees God. He sees all, God does. And David in his prayer here says, verse 12, after making these complaints, Arise, O Lord. O God, lift up your hand and forget not the humble. Now, remember, the Bible is always pro-humble. There's power in being humble. If you humble yourself in the sight of the Lord, he'll lift you up. But you try to lift yourself up, he's liable to have to knock you down and humble, you see. But there's power in being humble, and that's what David recognized. Lift up your hand, don't forget the humble people, Lord. Wherefore doth the wicked contemn God? He said in his heart, Thou wilt not require it, or that God ain't going to notice this, God ain't going to care. In fact, he says, if he's a fool, there is no God. Thou hast seen it, verse 14. David says, You've seen it, for you beholdeth mischief and spite, to requite it with your hand. The poor commits himself unto thee. Thou art the helper of the fatherless. So God's the helper of those who can't help themselves, and he helps those who help themselves too, if you trust in him. He's the helper of the fatherless. The poor commits himself unto him. Verse 15, David's praying, says, Break thou the arm of the wicked and the evil man. Break their power. Break the arm of the wicked and the evil man. Seek out his wickedness till you find none, or judge wickedness in this earth, Lord, till there ain't no wickedness. The Lord, he's king forever and ever. And see, that's what the wicked man's forgotten in his heart, that God's, there's an eternity. God's there forever and ever. The heathen are perished out of his hand, or he'll deal with them. He'll cast them into hell. Lord, thou hast heard the desire of the humble. There it is again. Be humble. Humble Christians. Thou wilt prepare their heart. Thou wilt cause thine ear to hear. And in that verse there, see, it's implied that if you want God to listen to you, then be humble. Come before him humbly. And Lord, verse 18, the last verse, David says, you'll listen to him in verse 17, verse 18, and you'll judge the fatherless and the oppressed. There's justice in God. It may not be in this world, but ultimately there's always going to be injustice. Or as the other psalmist said in 73, Psalm 73, when I went to the sanctuary of the Lord, then I understood their end. To judge the fatherless and the oppressed, that the man of the earth may no more oppress. See you next time for Psalm 11.